Onion Cycles podcast is about thought provoking, emotion evoking, action driven, step by step guidance to explore the unique, glorious, and wonderful ocean of your being. Because healing is a multi layered process of getting to know oneself. Become the self empowered empiric researcher by discovering the unique layers of your existence. With your host, Nadine Alma, welcome to the Holistic Healing Hub. Welcome to the Onion Cycles podcast. Hello, my beloved healing fellow onions. Welcome back to another episode. I'm so happy to have you back in this beautiful, safe space of ours. I hope life treats you good. I hope you're presented with everything that you need in order to grow, in order to heal. I hope you have made time for yourselves to salvage some of these energies that are around that contribute to us in the form of rest, in the form of peace, in the form of reflection, in the form of meditation. We are coming together here right now for our next episode, which is exactly that, meditation. And I believe that some of you have come across the meaning of meditation as being in deep reflection. Welcome to Story 15, Episode 15, Meditation. I will not dive into any scientific studies that have been popping up around the globe in the last 10 to 15 years about how beneficial meditation is, what it does, where it works in the brain, about the brain waves or anything like that. I wanted to do an episode about meditation that merely covers what I have found myself during the last 3 years of practice in meditation almost daily. And maybe there is a spark that is lit within you about making yourself a promise or making a promise for yourself to try and give meditation a chance to be practiced every single day, because that's how I started out on my meditation journey. For the last 7 years, I have been on and off with the topic of meditation. So I had like a month where I did it very consistently, and then I had 3 months of not doing it at all, and I just couldn't figure out how to approach it from a angle that was serving me. And this is why I decided to make a separate episode about meditation from the point of view on how we are able to make it our own. Because I'm not getting tired of saying it, there is no one shoe fits all. There is absolute certainty that meditation, as any other practice, is very unique, and we have to get to know ourselves in order to find a relationship with any practice that we want to implement into our lives. The same goes for meditation. And that is why I wanted to share what I found within the last 3 years of practicing it consistently, and how I was able to implement a consistency into my practice. First of all, what is meditation? We know this is a variety of practices that focus on body mind integration. So, meditation is used to calm the mind and enhance the overall well being. And I always like the quote, I think I quoted it in the last episode as well, where it's, if you don't make time for your wellness, you will be forced to make time for your illness. And that is exactly why I would highly recommend you to take on the challenge for yourself and make a promise to yourself to give it 5 or 10 minutes each and every single day with some sort of meditation to contribute to time for yourself, to contribute to feeling an overall calmness and peace and balance and centeredness again. The center within yourself again. I come to different ways of meditating later on in this episode. First, I wanted to highlight why meditation has been a proven method for me personally and for a lot of people to get these results. Like, why is it calming the mind? Why is it bringing peace? Why is it enhancing that feeling of balance and centeredness? Because I read a book, it's called The Tribe of Mentors by Tim Ferriss. You might know Tim Ferriss from the book The 4 Hour Work Week. And he interviewed billionaires, and he was basically asking them about their routines and their habits, and what 90% of them had in common was indeed some form of mindfulness practice, which meditation is a mindfulness practice. I found that quite interesting, and I feel like that's where I wanted to start, is to point out that every successful person takes time out of this reality to check in with themselves, either morning, afternoon, evening, or morning, afternoon, and evening, to make sure that they are still working towards what's good for them, what resonates with them, what they need on that specific day. And I feel like part of the success of meditation is it brought people back to themselves and out of that rat race of hustling, of constantly being bombarded with content, with advertisement, with other people's problems, with other people's needs, and sort of balanced out that feeling of being out of body and in constant motion and in constant high alert mode. And that is basically the first point I want to make, is the difference between the parasympathetic nervous system and the sympathetic nervous system, because most of us spend a lot of time in the sympathetic nervous system, meaning we are in a fight or flight mode. We have to do this, we have to do this next. Our responsibilities, our work, our load is so enormous that we rarely ever take time to soothe ourselves and check in with ourselves and take deep breaths to calm that parasympathetic nervous system, because it doesn't happen automatically. Fight or flight is automatically, basically, but so little. Um, and often, as we check in with ourselves, we are sort of regularly training that healthy habit of checking in with our parasympathetic nervous system, making a balance between the parasympathetic and the sympathetic. So that's how we then, in long term, change our ways of dealing with stress. And then obviously, there is a movement and rest that is prescribed in medicine for the body. So, in other words, meditation could be translated as movement and rest for the mind, because most of the time we are in constant movement through constant thinking, reflecting, questioning, organizing, working, and doing. And we are seldomly ever in the being. And the meditation is the practice of being in the now, which then brings me to the understanding of our emotions and pains and our bodies, because through meditation and through checking in with ourselves, maybe once a day, maybe 2 times a day, or how often we need it, we improve the focus and reduce the energy that is draining us through the constant brain chatter and the constant taking in of new information that our brain then has to discern if it is alarming, if it is normal, if it is relaxing, and shutting out everything that is overload. But the brain does that nonetheless, even if we think we are not taking in a lot while walking down the street. Our brain takes in everything, every honking, every noise from a construction site, every yelling, every energy around us is taken up space in our mind, in our brain. So we might feel drained after just having a walk around the block, just because it is not a reduce of information. It is actually a lot out there that constantly is bombarding our mind. And in practicing understanding meditation, we sort of enhance that subtle and very thin, and in the beginning very quiet voice that tells us what we need. And it lowers the stress when we know that we have a tool at our hands that we can tap into, and that regulates our anxiety, our panic attacks, our depression, or whatever we are struggling in the moment. It is also very useful to start this practice not with the aim of becoming a Buddhist monk in the Himalaya, but more from the perspective of realizing that what we hear in our mind, what we hear in our brain, is actually not us. We discern the mind from the self, if you will. We are becoming very observant of who is talking all the time in our heads. Like, what is that voice? Is that voice me, or am I something else, somewhere else? And I believe that is one of the most beneficial things that comes out of a regular practice, or has come out of my regular practice, is to realize, even when I'm in a day of rushing around and of trying to get things done, I realize that what is stressing me out, and that voice in my head that keeps telling me to go faster or do this and that, is not me. And that I can actually be the objective observer of that voice, and then decide for myself what I then truly need. If I truly need to listen to that voice right now, and if that voice is right, or if my body, my mind, my soul, my spirit needs something else than what that voice is telling us to do. So, becoming aware that we are not the mind, and that our mind runs the show most of the time, so it also feels good to take a break from that, and that the mind is a tool that has developed more or less unconsciously with thoughts, conditioning, and past experiences, what our reality looks like, and bringing that distance between all of that, because we then decide consciously that we are the voice now, that we totally respect and appreciate the mind for all the work it has done, and for keeping us safe all the time, and for the absolute magnificent job in making everything very effective, and trying to keep us from harm and keeping us safe. But also saying that what we want to do is gain back our empowerment, our self empowerment, to decide if the brain and the mind is right in that moment for us, or if we need to choose a different approach to it. And the last thing I want to say before diving into how I approached the sort of path of my own practice is that the peace and the quiet and the no thoughts that so many people think are required during meditation, I believe personally, is a result of the practice. We often talk on this podcast about how every single thing we approach has to be trained. We need to find our unique approach to it, and then we need to consistently not give up, never give up, and come back to the practice to establish the muscle. Like with every cardio and every training of anything, any practice, and any art form, it needs to be repeated, rinse, repeated, rinse, repeated, rinse, repeated, so that the muscle gets stronger. And I believe once the muscle is strong, that is when the peace and quiet and no thoughts have a void to live in. Because as a result, at some point out of the practice, it is important to realize that the thing is to get to a point to discern the mind from the self. And I believe in the very beginning of meditation practice, that should be the game. That should be the goal. The goal should be to realize when the mind chatter begins, when the brain chatter begins, when the monkey is doing backward flips and forward flips to keep us from realizing that it is a monkey and not us. And the observation is key. So, a long time I thought I have to sit down, I have to be uncomfortable, I have to live through that, I have to stop thinking, and if I think, then I'm doing it wrong. And I actually now realize that in the moment that I snap out of it, when a thought comes in, or when I have a train of thought and just drift off into the abyss of thoughts, I sometimes then snap out and I realize, oh, I'm thinking, well, okay, I let that go. And now I return to my breath and I focus on my breath again. And I believe that is the key moment, because that is when we start building that muscle of realizing that we are not our mind, we are not our brain. And that is where the beauty of meditation starts to get addictive. And then that is where we start to realize that it's actually nice to see this monkey for what it is and just let it go and come back to that place of, right, this is my body, this is my breath, this is how I feel. I let this thought go now. I let this feeling go through me and I let it go now. And that ability of training oneself to let go and to let it be and to let it float past is something that was absolutely deeply transformative for me, and I believe made a huge difference to my life. With all of that said, I also wanted to point out that I would highly recommend you checking out the website mindful.org, because they have a huge amount of articles about meditation, about mindfulness, about the benefits of it. They also quote and reference a lot of studies that have been done in that field. So, like we said in episode 1, curiosity, just dive straight in if that resonates with you. And for those of you who are new here, welcome. Let me also point out for you that on my website, www.onedefinder.org, you can download your free worksheet, and we have all of the stuff that we talk about neatly and nicely presented in a way that can enable you to go back to it, read through it, with lovely exercises that contribute to dive deeper into whatever we talk about in the week ahead. So it enables you to further your experience by the principle of think, feel, and act being the most important one, because only if we take action will our life truly change. I started meditation 7 years ago and I couldn't stick with it. I was adamant about sitting straight, cross legged, with a straight back. And if it is uncomfortable, I have to just sit through it. And I'm not allowed to have any thoughts. And if I have thoughts, then I'm not good at it. And at some point, I think 1 year in, when it was like an off and on thing between me and meditation, I came to the realization that it just isn't for me. I'm just such a high energy person that I just can't do it. And I sort of gave up for a whole year. Then a couple of things changed and I went back and forth. I found yoga, so I had a different approach with the rest, the deep rest after yoga that I really enjoyed. But then again, I always went back and forth between coming to the practice and then letting it go again. So I think it was 3 years ago, a little bit more than 3 years ago, when I decided to make myself a promise. And I said, I'm going to do meditation every single day. If it is just 10 minutes, that is perfectly fine. If it's 5 minutes, that is perfectly fine. But I want to see if I can quiet my mind. My mind is constantly chattering, and I want to have peace and tranquility in my life at least once a day. At this point, I made myself the promise to do that mostly because I went through a big change, meaning I started traveling full time. So I was craving to create a routine, a ritual that I could do anywhere without regards as to accommodation, and that would give me a sense of safety. So I promised that to myself, and I am happy to announce I stuck with it. But, and here's the big but, I didn't do it the way I thought I needed to do it. By making the promise to myself that I want to stick to it and that I want to implement the consistency and the devotion and the perseverance to see it through, I had to come up with different things in regards or relating to the situation of the day, to the feeling of the day, to the pressures of the day. So I started out with taking five. I pointed this one out, I think, in our episode called Breathing or Breath Work, because it is the most easy way to start off with a mindfulness practice. In my opinion, any mindfulness practice can be started with that take five approach, which is you basically set your timer for 5 minutes and then you sit down or you lie down, whatever feels comfortable for you. Remember, you're a unique human being. It's all up to what is comfortable for you and what is required to make the practice your own and to make it beneficial for you on your terms. So lie down, sit down, have a timer on your phone for 5 minutes and just breathe deeply. That can be a box breathing exercise where you inhale for a certain amount of seconds, hold it, exhale for a certain amount of seconds, hold it, and repeat that for a couple of times. That can also just be following your breath, your unique breath you have yourself. That could also just be breathing in deeply and out deeply, whatever feels good for you. The benefit of that is that you can do it anywhere. Like, even if you're at work and you just visit the bathroom and you just sit there or stand there, exercise deep breathing before you have a work meeting that makes you nervous. Even like if you have a disagreement, an argument with your partner, and you go to the loo to excuse yourself and say, I'm gonna go to the bathroom right now, or you walk around the block to calm your nerves, to make your mind feel more at ease. Or it is lovely when you're in a traffic jam and all around you there is honking and everyone seems to have the busiest and most unpleasant of times, and you just zone out for yourself and just with open eyes deep briefly and enjoy that time that has been given to you by the universe by traffic jamming you in with others. So before sleep, after you wake up, there really is no limits to when you can start doing this. And this was my very first approach. And from there, I started observing what has changed, how I had changed. So just the fact that I took 5 minutes per day to doing these breaths, I realized that I rarely ever differentiate between my mind chatter and me as a soul, as a personality. I identify very strongly with my mind, and these 5 minutes, the start of my meditation journey, made it very clear that I am not my mind and that my mind not always knows what's best for us as an eternal being living a human experience. So that was my first thing, and it turned out that in the life I led back then, I did that mostly before sleep. Which brings me then to the next step I took, which is the lost in thought situation where the mind wanders and thoughts pop up. I realized, like I said before, that that is actually good, because I was very strict with myself and approached this very seriously. I forgot that it is a learning process and that there is a learning curve. And for a learning curve to develop, you have to realize that it is actually there. So I started to see that, realizing that I got lost in thought and returning to my breath or returning to my exercise did more for me than just dismissing it and saying that this is nonsense, that it doesn't work for me, that I'm a different person, that meditation just isn't for me. So the lost in thought step was a huge step for me. It wasn't a long phase that I lived through doing and implementing the practice of meditation, but it was an epiphany to realize that it makes me happy to be lost in thought and be able to come back to the exercise, be able to come back to focus, and then go from there to say that, all right, I have the power to decide that I will now return to my practice and that I will not let the mind get in between me and what I know is going to be beneficial in the long run. So after the take 5 and my meditations got longer, I then had the epiphany that being lost in my thought, in my trains of thought, in my clouds of thoughts, leaving then, letting them go and coming back to the practice is actually what trains my muscle and improves my practice. From there, I realized that I was more in the presence. The more I went from being lost in thoughts to my breath, I sort of developed that mindfulness, that release of any and all judgment towards myself, that negative self talk, that decision I make every single time, coming back to my breath, coming back to the presence, to stay present and to, in that sense, then learn how to come back to the present, and doing that not only during my meditation, which was the most life changing after the take 5, was suddenly it was a lifestyle thing. It wasn't just a 5, 10, 20 minutes before bed after waking up thing. It was a during being awake in my normal everyday life, realizing that I feel stressed, but that I know I can be different, and that it most certainly is because I am not present. So, from the take 5 to the realization of the beauty and grace of being lost in thought and coming back to the present, to then actually translating that into my everyday life by snapping out of it and persisting in wanting to be present because it was so much less stressful and more relaxing. I then went to a sort of body scan. By that time, I think it was like 9 months in that I started craving a meditation at night before bed that was less demanding, because I found it quite hard to practice in a seated cross-legged position without music, without anything to focus on except my breath. And when I'm tired, I just fell asleep, and I didn't want to fall asleep every time I was meditating, even though I wasn't judgmental. Like, I just thought, all right, I just need that sleep more than I needed the meditation. But because I took the promise to myself seriously, I wanted to see it through. So I went to do body scans, and that was just the most soothing. And I do them to this day whenever I feel out of balance, because it is possible in a sitting or a lying position, and I can actually focus my energy onto something. And then it got deeper over the years. By now, I really feel, whenever I start with my tippy toes and work my way up to the crown of my head or the other way around, I really feel how my focus shifts the energies. For example, by now, if I have a headache, I do a body scan and I try to breathe the stuck energy in my head down my spine and get it flowing again. And it actually, I think, 6 times out of 10, it works, which is to me mind blowing. Science has proven that that is absolutely possible, but then feeling it in your own body and realizing that you're actually doing it is just mind boggling. After doing the breathing podcast episode and taking you on the journey with me through a breathing exercise, I thought I wanted to share with you the body scan exercise in a separate episode so that you may feel that intense healing and peaceful, tranquil, calm, joyful, wonderful practice that I found to be so beneficial in every possible way. So, we're gonna do that in our next episode, which will be story 15, but episode 16, it will be a body scan. So, then lastly, what I want to say is that what I said at the beginning still holds true for all of you out there. Meditation is a practice that is deeply unique to you, and there are loads of different practices. There are still practices and there are active practices. And depending on how your day was, depending on what you need, your meditation practice can look different from day to day. Like, it doesn't always have to be sitting still and breathing. It can be laying down and breathing. It can be a guided meditation before sleep. It can be a guided meditation right after waking up. It can be sound bath meditations. I found them just absolutely stunning, and I've been doing them for the past 3 to 4 months now, nearly once or twice a week, because the frequency that most of these sound bath meditations send out are aiming at some very specific thing that you want to work on. So, for example, if I have period pains, I put a sound bath on with a frequency in it that is specifically designed to ease pain. If I want to have a deep sleep, there is another frequency. And I am very much looking forward to taking you on a journey in some of the next episodes where we dive into the mysterious realms of frequency and vibration and how physics is now catching up on all of this. And studies show that we are all made up of frequency and vibration. So it is quite the logical thing to realize that a sound bath meditation can aim at a very specific problem or challenge we want to work through and ease it and enable us to heal while we give ourselves to that vibration and let that vibration heal us and our own frequency. There are also visualizations, basically from your office to the Caribbean in 5 minutes with deep breathing and headphones on. There is a lot of resource on mindful.org. I mentioned them earlier. They don't just provide information and science, they also provide a lot of lovely, wonderful meditations that you can try out with different times, starting at 1 minute to start you off and build up that muscle up to 25 minutes. And obviously, we all have YouTube. We all know that YouTube provides a ton of wonderful resource as well. And lastly, I wanted to say that the active ways to meditate is basically any mindfulness practice. We had an episode that was called Rituals and Routines, and basically every routine that you want to transform into a ritual is a mindfulness practice, meaning that there are meditations about eating, there are meditations about walking, Even running can be a meditation if it clears your head and if you focus on your breath and if you feel energized after, in the sense that you can't even picture the anger anymore that you had before you went for a run. There are, like, every arts and crafts, every knitting, sewing, and painting that you do fully aware, fully present, with the thoughts not on something else, not watching TV on the side or listening to a podcast, but really being present on how everything feels and having every sense involved in your practice. That is also mindful, that is also meditation. And obviously, if you lie and listen to music and feel intensely and suddenly emotions come up and you feel through them, that is also a meditation. That is a state of thinking deeply, and that is a state of feeling through stuff. So you're actively meditating. You also have affirmations and prayers, which are a different kind of meditation, but nonetheless are beneficial to calm your mind and get out of your system whatever you need to get out of your system. Let's not forget that studies have shown that affirmations is not lying to yourself. It is merely a retraining of your mind, a reframing of the conditioning and the behavioral patterns that were accumulated through the years of your past. So, yeah, there's a lot of information out there, and I hope I was able to bring this information in a concise but nonetheless compelling way to you. For you, I hope it resonated with you, at least some of it. I do truly hope that you are on a journey where you are up for taking this to the next level, trying it for yourselves and making a promise to yourself to dedicate some of your time towards meditation. It is truly beneficial. And I do hope that you tune in next week for our body scan meditation. I am very excited to guide you through that in the hopes that it is of service to you, that it is of service to your energy and whatever you're going through, that it takes your mind off of this very challenging and at times harsh life, and that it in the long run gives you some solace to come back to, listen to again, and eventually do it for yourselves and learn to lead yourself and guide yourself through your own very unique and special practice of body scans. With all of that said, I love you very much. I do understand you, and I do hope that my content brings you some joy, ignites some form of self empiric researcher that enables you to get to know yourself better and lead the life you want to live. Until next time, my beloved fellow healing onions.